exploration potential on it. So we see this as being a small, high-grade underground operation, but one which would be very robust in most metal price scenarios due to the fact that it has such good grades to it. So we're quite excited about looking forward to receipt of the feasibility study, and then with that in hand, making our next steps with respect to the project.
Isn't it fair to say, though, Bob, because the grades are so high over there, that's probably going to become a mine anyway? It's just a question of how great the cost will be in your favor in terms of low production costs. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I would tend to think the project, as you point out, at some time will be mineable, and one would always hope sooner than later. It's one of those things of getting the results in and then being able to make the decisions around it. But I say, from the time it was discovered as the joint venture to where we are now, we've moved it along as aggressively as we can. We've got an environmental impact study in progress, so as soon as we receive the data and we want to move forward with it, we can, move towards production on it quite expediently. So, again, having those kinds of grades, as you point out, certainly allows one the ability to make quick decisions. And because it's a smaller operation, your capital is going to be less. And so we'll be looking forward to getting those numbers released to the public in the not-too-distant future.
Okay, and I should disclose probably that I've owned shares in Esperanza Silver for some time here, though I bought them on the cheap, but I'm in that. And since you mentioned the name, I wouldn't have mentioned it, but since you did, I'm just going to disclose here. How about Pitarrilla, which has over 700 million ounces of combined measured and indicated and inferred silver resources with a high silver recovery rate of nearly 90%. How promising does that project look to you at this point?
Well, Pitarrilla, of course, is a 100% owned property that we found ourselves by exploring back in 2002. And we've been encouraged from the fact that we have almost a camp there. There are a wide variety of separate deposits from the Breccia Ridge Zone, which is the main area, to the South Zone. We've got the Javelina Creek Zone, the Gordon, Colorado, Pena Dike. So we have a number of zones that are individual, but collectively they make the large resource that you speak about. And there's also different styles of mineralization. The mineral, of course, near surface is often oxidized, and it reacts a little differently than you find in material at depth. And the Breccia Ridge underground, which is the area that we focused our first pre-feasibility study work on, is where we get those, as you point out, those very good recoveries. And we completed a pre-feasibility study, which we announced back in June, where we outlined around upwards of 90-odd million ounces that we would have in a reserve. So it represents only a component of this overall project. And so with an underground component of the project now showing it would be viable, we're now looking at bulk mining underground, as well as now going back and looking at the superficial deposits, because they make up, again, another about third of the overall resource. So we're going to be at Pitarrilla, we think, for some time, both understanding it, but seeing it grow as a fully integrated operation where you may start with one area of the project, develop it, and then be able to use the cash flow from that to generate going forward, again, managing dilution for shareholders. And so rather than starting with a very large project, which would have a very high capital cost, we can do something which is more manageable with our balance sheet, and then from there go forward and start incrementally to bring on other parts of this kind of silver mining camp that we've outlined on that project.
Any other standout project that should be highlighted?
Well, the other one, of course, that we've been focusing on of late is our Snowfield property. And the Snowfield is located in northern British Columbia, and I was up there just 2 weeks ago with some of our board members on a very nice British Columbia day. We've got 6 drills working there. We've got about 70 people working at site between drillers and our geologists. And the Snowfield property is one where we've outlined a very significant gold resource. In January of this year, we announced where we have about 4 million ounces of measured and indicated resources and another 14 million ounces of inferred. And what we're doing this year is doing infill drilling on the inferred resources to move it up into measured and indicated category, also looking for more gold mineralization in and around the Snowfield zone. And then about 7 or 8 kilometers south, we've outlined another area called the Brucejack area where we'd had some higher grade gold mineralization identified before. And we've been drilling it, and last week put out some drill results on the Snowfield property, which showed, again, we may have potential for more bulk mineable gold mineralization down there. So to put it in context, those of your listeners who may be familiar with the Seabridge property, we're adjacent to it. They've outlined a very large gold resource, and we have the same style of mineralization. And so we've been very encouraged with the results that we've had over the last few years, and we look forward continuing to add to the resource that we've outlined to date on it.
Real briefly here, Bob, what about consolidation in the mining sector? Because some of these companies are struggling, and Silver Wheaton put together a phenomenal deal recently and is still looking to do so. You have your plate full, I understand that, but are you looking at possible acquisitions, and do you see more of these types of acquisitions in general in the sector going forward?
Well, with Silver Standard, as you point out, we've got 16 projects around the world which are all silver-centric and ones that we've been picking up since 1993, and so we have an excellent organic pipeline in which to grow the company. Having said that, we do want to be a premium silver producer in the space, and often there are individual or standalone companies or maybe interest in other projects which could complement our portfolio. So we continue to monitor, other companies which are in the silver space to see how they're doing and determine if there, is some further benefit for shareholders. But we have to do it so it's non-dilutive. And where we own so many of our own projects at much lower silver prices, often buying a project now means you may have to pay up, and it can get dilutive. So it's about balancing the projects that we have and the pipeline that we have with maybe other opportunities which are out there which will be accretive to our shareholders. But again, being very shareholder-centric, we want to make sure that we maintain our leverage to the silver price. And I think if you look at our company, perhaps versus some of the other silver equities which are out there on a per-share basis, if you start looking at it, we give shareholders a good exposure to silver. We have about 6 to 7 ounces of inferred resources per share. You're looking at probably on the order of 14 or 15 ounces of measured and indicated resources per share, and then 3 to 4 ounces of proven and probable reserves per share. So it's all about us maintaining that leverage on a per-share basis to silver for our shareholders.
Silver Standard obviously has the largest in-ground silver resource of any publicly traded primary silver company, but you've had accelerated, and we'll just close with this, Bob, but you've had accelerated growth in gold resources, and I believe they quadrupled in a year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Our overall gold resources, let's say a year ago, we had about 4 million ounces of measured and indicated, about another 1 million ounces of inferred resources, and now we're up to, close to 5 million ounces, a little over 5 million ounces of 6 million ounces of measured and indicated resources, and another 16 to 17 million ounces of inferred resources. So you're right, we've increased that not quite 5 times. And that's because of the Snowfield project we have in northern British Columbia, as well as some of the gold and some of our other projects elsewhere in the world. So we also have very good gold exposure that complements our silver exposure, and that's, a good thing to have at this time of renewed interest in precious metals.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bob. I know you're busy over there, and we greatly appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for joining us at KingWorldNews.com. Remember to tune in next week for another great show where we will have Bob Prechter from Elliott Wave International, Peter Schiff from Euro Pacific Capital, and Jeff Burns, CEO of Pan American Silver. Also remember to go to our Gold Plus page for exclusive weekly interviews with Ted Butler and Gata, and the business page for Barry Ritholtz, author of Bailout Nation.